What's up, yo? Welcome to Your One Life. I'm your host, Kim Young Kim, and I'm super excited about today's episode. But first, if you're new here, here's what this podcast is all about. This podcast is all about teaching you from the greatest minds in the world, helping you in all aspects of your life, and helping you take minutes off of your mile time. Why run when you can drive? It's time to work smarter, not harder, y'all. All right, so we are hopping into part 2 of my series on the book, Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before, by Dr. Julie Smith. And this book has been super helpful for me. I've been using some of these techniques to process my emotions, to get through my day, practicing good mental health, and I am super thankful for this book. Now, we're going to start this episode off by talking about emotional damage. No, just kidding. We're talking about emotional pain, and they are not the same because damage is long-term, but pain is temporary. So as we deal with our emotions, here's what you're not supposed to do with your emotions. Push them away, try to suppress them, and also don't believe them as facts. Years ago, I was living with a friend of mine, and I had the flu, and I was trying my best to not get my friend sick. But in my head, I started having this conversation with myself that my friend was upset with me, that I was exposing my friend to getting the flu themselves. And then I started to feel really guilty and bad. And it was this whole conversation in my own head and the emotions that followed it. And when I had a conversation with that friend, they were like, nah, man, you're good. No worries. I feel completely safe. And I feel like you've been taking care of me to make sure that I don't get sick. And that's the problem with emotions, right? They're oftentimes not based in truth. Now, as I mentioned in the previous episode, Dr. Julie Smith has a lot of really good toolkits and journal exercises to help you to process all the things that you're going through and also to excavate your past so you can have a better future. And because of that, I highly recommend that you pick up the book so you can go through all the exercises yourself. Here's one that I found that was super helpful though. It's about examining your coping strategies. Now, we all have coping strategies when we are dealing with difficult emotions, and some of them are helpful and some of them are not. Now, one of the questions she asked in this toolkit is, what behaviors follow your strong emotions, and do they actually help you in the short term? Also, what are the long-term effects of them? Yeah, because you got to figure out if what you're doing not just helps you in the present, but that it also doesn't have long-term implications that hinder you in your future. Another part of this toolkit is what stories, thoughts, and beliefs are present. And what she says is, have a trusted friend go over the story with you and try to help you find the biases or misunderstandings. Years ago, I had this mentor. His name was Nathan, super good dude. And some of the conversations that we had shifted my perspective on life, shifted my perspective on the world at large, and really helped pivot my mindset into a more positive one. And so having someone who you trust go over your thoughts, your beliefs, and your story will help you to just sort these things out and to become a better version of yourself, and to find those biases and misunderstandings, which will better your life significantly. Now, something she mentions repeatedly throughout the book is you are not your emotions and your emotions are not you. And what you got to do is see your emotions for what they are, things that pass through you temporarily. And yeah, oftentimes they do tell you what you need. For example, are you embarrassed because you have bad body odor? Well, that might be telling you you need a stronger deodorant and not Tom's. You don't want to smell like Tom. Tom gets no numbers, okay? But in all seriousness, your emotions may be telling you what you need. And it's important to give your emotions a name. That's something that she talks about repeatedly. So when you give it a name and you get real specific, for example, maybe you feel irritated, that might be a great sign that you need to go for a walk. Or maybe you feel isolated. Well, that's a good sign that you need to reach out to some people. Or maybe you feel disrespected. Well, that's a sign that you need to do a 360 tomahawk dunk on your basketball nemesis. Put him on the poster. It'll make you feel better, trust me. Okay, so in the book, she mentions this thing called self-soothing, and it's something that we all need to do in order to calm ourselves down, in order to bring our emotions into check. So one of the first things you need to do is tell yourself that you're safe. Once you do that, maybe you put on some good music that helps calm you down. Maybe you chat with a friend, possibly dial up an overseas prince who owes you money. They're usually good about taking calls, right? Another thing you can do is start moving your body, focus on your breathing, bring things into your sense of smell. That's actually super helpful according to research. Take a warm bath, and whatever else helps you to calm down. Now, there's this one trick in the book where people actually take a plush doll, they cut it open, they put the scent of lavender inside the plush doll, and anytime they're stressed out, what they do is they open up the hole of the plush doll, and then they smell the lavender, and it calms them down. Now, this is a nice little Jedi trick to calm yourself down, but don't do this at the airport because you might end up having a flight delay and an interrogation and a pat down. Now, when it comes to self-soothing, you can have a box of things in it that help you to calm down. Maybe on a sheet of paper, you have something that says, call a friend. Or maybe you have a pen and a pad to write down your feelings. Or maybe you have a photograph in there. See, the guy from Nickelback was not wrong. He said, look at this photograph. That's right, Chad Kroger. You hit that nail on the head. Shout out to Nickelback for their great life advice. But in all seriousness, maybe you have a piece of paper with a music list, and all of these things are there to help calm you down. You can also have one of these inside your car. Maybe you have pop rocks inside of there. Maybe you have a voodoo doll. Maybe you have a blue bandana to remind you that you're part of something bigger than yourself and that you have a whole worldwide network of gang members who have your back in case stuff hits the fan. Let's go. Or maybe you have a digital version of this. In my digital self-soothing box, I only have one thing, which is a picture of David Hasselhoff. There's nothing more calming than a picture of the Hoff. If you know, you know. All right, and as you're experiencing these emotions, give emotions a specific name. She actually has in the book a wheel of emotions that talks about big emotions, then narrows it down into smaller subcategories of those big emotions, and then narrows it down even further from those subcategories. So here's an example. Sad is a big category, lonely is a smaller version of sad, and a subset of lonely is isolated. Or on the flip side, happy is a big category, joyful is a subset of that, and liberated is a even smaller subset of joyful. So giving emotions a name will help you to realize exactly what you're dealing with and help you to choose the best response to them. Recently, I was going through this, actually. I was feeling sad, and as I looked at the wheel, I said, no, I also feel guilty, and also I feel remorseful, right? And that helped me to take an action, which is to return my neighbor's car. I probably shouldn't have took it in the first place, but whatever. You live and you learn, right? But in all seriousness, that was my experience, and I did do something to help me deal with that feeling of remorse. So as you focus on your feelings, one of the things she says is you need to journal, and don't just focus on the sadness when you journal. Journal about happiness too, because like I said in the past episode, it's more easy to cultivate these positive feelings, these positive thoughts, and these memories in the future when you realize what gets you there. Now, this next section is about how to support other people. I can't go through every single thing, but this section is absolutely wonderful and super helpful. Now, with the tips in this section, think of it as a menu that you can pull from and use these tips and practices accordingly. You know your friends and family, you know the people you care about, and so some of these practices will not work for them, And that's why you have to personalize for each individual person, just like you do with all other interactions that you have with people. So one of the things that she says is just be there. Sometimes you don't have to have the right words. Sometimes that person isn't ready to talk, but it's very important that you show that you care. And sometimes just being there is super huge. I know that in my darkest hours, I remember those friends who decided to show up, who decided to be there for me. And even if they didn't do anything monumental for me, I'll remember those friends and I'll remember them and their kindness probably till the day I die. So make sure that you show up to support. That's super important. Also, if your friend has a specific diagnosis, learn about that diagnosis. That way you can know how to better help them. So if your friend, for example, has eczema, you can hop on WebMD and you can read about it and realize that the eczema will probably kill them. Good old WebMD, always there to scare the bejesus out of all of us. But in all seriousness, learn about your friend's diagnosis, then you will be able to help them. Something that's super related is ask your friends how you can support them, because they know what they need and they'll be able to communicate that. But sometimes people don't communicate what they need because they don't want to ask. But if you ask them, hey, how can I support you? That opens the door for them to give you some answers. Also, like we said in the previous episode, create a crisis plan with your friend. Another helpful tip, listen with empathy. I used to mentor this kid who was in a wheelchair. I met him through this program called Covenant House. And he was in a wheelchair because he got shot. And so he has no ability to walk from the age of about 15 on. And I think it was about the second or third time we were hanging out. And he was just lamenting to me. And he was like, man, you should have seen me back in the day. I used to be a dancer. I used to move. There was nothing I could say or do in that moment that would make his problems go away, that would make him feel very much better. And so I just listened, I just let him talk, and I just let him vent out his frustrations. And sometimes that's all you can really do. But that is super helpful. Don't underestimate the impact you can make by just listening with empathy. Also, don't have pressure to have these huge, big conversations. You don't always have to have big conversations. Sometimes you just have small conversations. Sometimes, you just talk about other things, which is another thing she said. Distraction is helpful sometimes just to get them to stop thinking about the thing that has caused them this emotional pain. But if you do end up having a conversation with them, oftentimes walking and talking is helpful because you're not sitting across from each other. And people generally, when they walk, their brains light up more and they're able to process things more. And they might be more open to opening up as they're walking. Now, this is not from the book, but here's an idea of mine. Get the conversation going by saying something embarrassing about yourself. For example, my dream car is a 2006 Honda Odyssey. Now, you may be laughing right now, but once you experience those bucket seats, ain't no going back. All right. Now, going back to Dr. Smith's advice, ask open-ended questions. If you are talking with this person and trying to help them process, don't ask, are you okay? Ask the question, what are you thinking? What are you thinking is a better question to ask to get them to open up. And again, it's not always about getting people to open up, but if that is the goal of the conversation and that is what they're welcoming in, then asking open-ended questions is more helpful. Also, don't offer up advice unless your friend or family member asks you for advice. I personally have a problem of being a fixer, and so when people tell me about their problems, oftentimes I try to fix the situation. But what I've learned is sometimes people just need you to listen, to repeat back to them what they're saying, and that is enough. So a good question to ask in this situation is, are you looking to vent or are you looking for solutions? And If they're looking for solutions, help them find them. I had a friend from back in the day who used to tell me his troubles about meeting women, and every time we'd have this conversation, I would start coming up with this plan to fix things, this plan to help him, this strategy, so on and so forth. And eventually it turned into a blow up via text message where he was like, yo, this is not helpful. You trying to fix all my problems is actually creating more isolation in me. I'd appreciate it if you don't do this anymore. And I didn't know. I didn't know that I was creating more problems, but that's exactly what I was doing. And one last tip to offer about helping support someone you care about is if you don't know how to help, just tell them, hey, I don't know how to help. And then you can ask them, hey, is what I'm saying and doing helpful? Is it hurtful? And that can create an open conversation for you to actually be helpful towards them. Dr. Julie Smith, where have you been all my life? England, apparently. But I'm glad that I've gotten a hold of this book, and I'm glad that I'm able to communicate these ideas to you right now. Yo, check it. Show people that you care just by being there. That's what you got to do. They are aware that you care about them right now. And that's what I'm saying. Yo, I just found a specific diagnosis up on WebMD. And that's what I say. Yo, I just send these things to your mind like a crisis plan. You got to understand how you're going to get them up on their feet. I'm busting the street. Spit a freestyle. Something complete. I'm talking about listen with empathy. And that's what you need. So you could just take in all the things they're saying. Yo, I'm just staying up in your mind about conversations. I'm talking about how you walk and you talk. And that's what I say. Do it nonstop. Maybe you could ask a question that's open-ended. Yo, befriending your people right now. Ask them what they are thinking. And that's what I'm saying. Yo, I'm just bringing a whole bunch of advice, but don't need that. That's what I'm saying. Yo, I step back. I'm talking about distractions. That's satisfaction. Sometimes when we don't understand how the sun shines, might not hit us again. And that's what I say when I spit it, I send words to your brain, straight from Julie Smith. Nothing but a gift. And that's how we lift our friends right there. And that's how it goes. And that's what I'm saying. End of the flow. All right, so that's a section on emotional pain. There's another section about grief that is very, very helpful. And one distinction that she makes in the book is grief is not always about death. People grieve about many different things. Maybe you're grieving a job that you lost. Maybe your twin brother just joined the Marines. They're going to be gone for 4 years. But even more important, you're going to lose every fist fight that you have going forward. That's a scary thought. Or maybe you got a bad haircut. There's nothing wrong with wearing all black until your next haircut, okay? You do you. You mourn the way you mourn, and there's no judgment, and there's no right or wrong way to mourn, which is actually, in all seriousness, very true, right? So grieving is normal, grief is normal, and we should understand that and realize that it's just a part of life. Now, one of the things that she says that's super helpful is things that help may not make the pain disappear or force you to let go. Sometimes things that bring temporary relief do just that, bring you temporary relief. Just like medicine brings us temporary relief, but we need to use it when it's prescribed because that's what it's there for. Another thing she says about grief is if you try to block out your grief, what it'll do is it'll lead to problems later. So you got to feel the grief. You got to understand that sadness is normal and there are positive ways to deal with grief, which is what this section is all about. So let's say, for example, you're going through your 5 stages of grief and you feel anger, right? Well, when you feel anger, you have to get rid of that anger, right? You have to either vent or you have to do some physical movements. One of those two will help you get rid of your anger. Maybe you do some angry workouts, you get swole, and then you pull up on the girl who dumped you and say, how you like me now? Not that I've ever done this before. But before you can do anything with your grief in regards to anger, you have to get rid of that anger first, and then you can practice mindfulness but only after you deal with your rage. Another thing that she talks about in the book is ruminating by yourself is very, very toxic, as I mentioned in the previous episode. And talking about what ifs will only lead to self-blame and is super unproductive in processing grief. This reminds me of one of my favorite quotes that goes, "Nothing we can do can change the past, but everything we do changes the future," by Ashley Brilliant. And that's what it's all about. You're not going to change the past. The past is the past. But as you grieve in a positive way, how you grieve changes your future. And that's why grieving correctly is so important. Another thing she said is denial can help. You heard it here, folks. Denial can help. And true story, denial actually can help. Sometimes whatever you're going through is so overwhelming that denying that it's happening right now will help you to stay sane and to make it through another day. And that's what it's all about. Another thing she says is feel whatever is there. If you're feeling pain, feel the pain. If you're feeling joy, feel the joy. Feel whatever is there. There's nothing abnormal about any feelings that you have while you're grieving. And as you grieve, take small steps forward every day. Now, there's a book called Girl, Wash Your Face, which I find super disrespectful because I don't like being called a girl. And there's no disclaimer on the title saying that it's only for girls. But for the other 50% of the populace, I think that is a positive message. And that's one thing that she mentions in the book. If washing your face is a struggle, then to have that as the small step forward that you do every day, just to keep moving forward as you're grieving. She also says to make sure that you express yourself, and expressing yourself can be speaking, writing, painting, moving your body. But whatever you do, get those ideas out of your head, because when they bounce around in there, generally there's nothing positive that comes about from that. Another tip she gives is to remember the person and also keep living. So it's this combination of thinking about the person that you lost if you lost somebody, and also distracting yourself with life, because life does go on. And sometimes the elements of living is a healthy distraction from your loss. Now, one of the best tips that I read in the book is to grow around the wound. And we should do this in all things. To realize that there's a wound, but we need to continue to live our lives and grow around it. Not that it will ever heal, but when it comes to losing somebody, celebrate and feel your connection to that person, but continue to live your life where you're acknowledging your loss, but you're also growing your life around your loss, so that even though it's always going to be a part of you, your life also continues to grow forward from it. Now, a good friend of mine, his name is Brian Bushway, he lost his eyesight when he was 14 years old. And when he was 14 years old, as he went from somebody who had 20/20 vision to becoming completely blind in a matter of maybe 3 months, one of the things his mom told him as he was going through this terrible situation is, even though your life is different now, you can still continue to engage in the most important aspect of human existence, which is having relationships with other people. So as he was living his life and having to adjust to losing his eyesight, he grew around that wound of being blind, and he still continued to move forward in life. And he's a super inspirational person. You should look him up, and I will have him on the podcast at some point. Now, as you're grieving, Dr. Julie says sometimes you do need to go see a therapist, particularly if you're grieving the loss of a loved one, because what they're professionally trained to do is they are trained to help you through something like this. They're trained to sit and listen and know when to speak and know when to be quiet. And they have all the tools, as you see in this book with Dr. Smith generously sharing her tools, to help you through your grief and to help you come out victorious on the other side. Again, I'm going to use that analogy. When you have physical pain and your physical pain becomes too much, what do? You go to a professional. When you have emotional pain, it's the same thing. You have to see somebody to help you through if you're struggling in a major way. You gotta listen to yourself and just see what yourself is telling you is what you need. Take care of yourself and you will process this pain. Make sure that you put self-care at the top because you need to put yourself first. In a difficult time, be reminded that this too shall pass. You just have to hold on. All right, so like I just said, listen to your needs, take care of yourself as you're grieving, and you will get through this. All right, so that's a wrap on part 2 of my series on the book, Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? Big shout out again to Dr. Julie Smith for writing this amazing book. I hope you gleaned a lot from it, and I hope you implement these practices into your life as you're dealing with emotional pain and as you're dealing with grief. I'm positive that if you do, it will make things better. Now, there will be a part 3 and part 4 on this series. If you like what you heard in today's episode, don't forget to hit follow so that you don't miss future episodes. And if this podcast has been helpful to you, please rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcasts, in Spotify, and anywhere else that you can rate and review it. Your ratings and reviews do help significantly on helping get the word out on the podcast, and also to help get really good guests in the future, which is something I'm planning to do very soon. If you want to connect with me on Instagram, I'm at Your One Life Podcast. And I would love to hear from you, hear any feedback that you have. Check out any cat memes you think are great. And in general, it's always good to connect. By the way, shout out to my man Siraj Aziz for making the great intro and outro music. If you want to check him out, I will tag him in the show notes. This is Your One Life. I'm Kim Young Kim. I hope you have a fantastic week. And until next time, peace.